The gift. I remember the first year Father gave me a 5-mark piece for Hanukkah. In those days in Germany, that was a lot of money. I thought I could buy the whole world if I wanted. That night, I fell asleep with the 5-mark piece in my hand, barely able to close my fingers around the large round coin. The next day at school, I kept reaching into my pocket to make sure the coin was still there. I could hardly pay attention because my head was full of ideas about how to spend the money. On my way home, I passed by all my favorite shops. First, I went into the stationery store. I always admired the fountain pens when I came to buy pencils. There were particularly important-looking ones in silk-lined boxes set out in the glass display case. I was sure those were the kind that famous writers used. When the tall, thin lady behind the counter asked me what I wanted, I pointed to a gold-tipped pen as blue as the winter sky. She took out a small bottle of ink, dipped the pen, and drew the ink up into it. Then she handed the pen to me. I laid my 5-mark piece on the counter, put the pen between my fingers, and tried to write on the big white pad. The letters didn't come out quite the way I intended. I tried several other pens, but I couldn't make up my mind. So I took back my money, and I walked on. In the bakery window, there was a whole row of gingerbread men holding little white clay pipes in front of their bellies. I knew just how sweet and spicy the gingerbread tasted, and with one of those clay pipes and a bowl of sudsy water, I could blow the most wonderful rainbow-colored bubbles. Undecided, I lingered before the display. A woman walked into the apothecary next door. I always liked going there with my mother. All 4 walls were lined with shelves from the floor to the tall ceiling. On them were boxes and containers packed with soaps and bath salts and creams and lotions. Because it was Christmas time, the boxes were most beautifully wrapped in colored papers and tied with ropes of silver and gold. Fragrances mingled in the air. The shop owner was a short, round man with a polished, bald head and whiskers. He knew me well and always had a miniature perfume bottle or a special little soap just for me. What I liked best were the 2-sided mirrors that lay in a basket near the big cash register. One side was a regular mirror, and the other was like a magnifying glass. When I held it close to my face, I could see the different colors in the irises of my eye. My irises are brown and green with yellow speckles, and when I held the mirror farther away, my face became bigger and fuzzier in it. The shop owner leaned over the counter and gave me an extra big smile. I held the mirror to his face. His smile covered the whole mirror, and quickly I put it down again. Miss Lily, the lady in the hat shop, saw me passing by and waved to me. I walked down the 3 steps into her store. My mother occasionally had a hat designed by her and often just stopped by to chat. All over the store were ladies' torsos with hats on their heads, and some of them smiled into space, while others seemed to forever ponder something distant, just like Miss Lily. Miss Lily lifted her newest creation off a stand and showed it to me. It sparkled with sequins and rhinestones. The hat that I liked best was made of white felt with a wide brim and a scarf that tied under the chin in an enormous bow. I sat on a chair in front of the big 3-way mirror and admired myself in the hat. Miss Lily seemed pleased, and she gave me a shiny red apple. I crossed the main street to get to the toy store. Its neon sign shone brightly through the wintry twilight. Beckoning me inside, bells jingled as I pushed open the heavy door, and for a moment I stood absolutely still. I hardly knew where to look first. There were rows and rows of dolls in rectangular boxes, reaching out their arms towards me. Plush bears growled on command. A wooden duck with 6 ducklings on wheels was moving across the floor right in front of me. On one of the counters, there was a collection of wind-up toys. There was a cat with a drum and a ballerina, mice in colorful tutus, and a bear and with cymbals, and monkeys with trumpets and tambourines. One by one, I wound them up until they all danced and played together. Each one cost 4 marks and 50 pfennigs. I would even have some money left over to buy a little bag of roasted chestnuts at the kiosk on the way home. As I tried to make up my mind, the wind-up toys began to slow down and the monkeys' tambourines gave their last tiny jingles. "Well?" asked the saleslady, who had approached me. I reached for the 5-mark piece in my pocket. There it was, big and round in my hand. I held on to it, and I left the store quickly. It was getting dark outside. Soft white snowflakes were drifting in the air. People seemed to be walking more briskly. But I stopped in front of the pet store. How I wished for a puppy or a kitten. I would even settle for a hamster or a mouse. And there was a basket of tiny gray kittens in the display window. One of them had 4 white paws. I was thinking about their names for kittens, when I heard a beautiful tune. It came from an accordion player who was sitting among a pile of blankets in front of a grocery market. People passed him by, some of them carelessly dropping a groschen into a hat beside him. I don't know how long I stood in front of the musician, listening to his lovely music. The stores around were closing up one by one. I could hear the clanging of keys being turned in door locks. Metal shutters rattled against display windows and fell into place. People were rushing by to get home with their packages. Only the musician's tune continued soft and slow through the busy evening. I slid my hand into my pocket and touched the 5-mark piece. Quickly, I tossed it into the hat. He was not supposed to notice, but I think he saw it anyway. "Come," he said, "sit by me. I will show you how to play." Hesitantly, I set down my school bag on the sidewalk. It had already gotten rather late when he placed the accordion on my lap. I was surprised at how heavy it was. He showed me how to pull it apart and push it together slowly, his fingertips pressed against mine on the little buttons that made the sounds. The winter cold pinched at my nose and cheeks, but I was happy as never before. And soon the musician had taught me enough so that we could play a tune together. It sounded as though we had been practicing for a long time. Another tune followed and then another, and I was almost able to play by myself. The snow was now blowing harder, but people stopped anyway to watch and listen, and coins kept dropping into the hat, and I knew I had to be home by the time the first star appeared. But I hoped it would be a long while until then, and that this wonderful evening would last forever.